Sir, this auction is for real buyers, not barn ghosts. That's what the auctioneer laughed as the old man in oil-stained overalls raised his hand. Nobody looked at him. Nobody cared. He'd been standing there for over an hour, silent, still forgotten, until a black SUV rolled up. A uniformed general stepped out, eyes scanning the crowd, and then shouted, "That man built the machines that carried us home. If you believe real worth can't be measured in clothes or noise, comment respect below." The Limestone County Farm Equipment Auction happened every spring when farmers traded up for newer models and the less fortunate hunted for bargains. Today's event was bigger than most. The Henderson estate sale meant premium equipment on the block. Earl Mac McConnell arrived an hour early. At 72, he moved deliberately, each step measured against the decades of wear on his joints. His overalls, faded blue with patches at both knees, had seen at least 1,000 oil changes. The jacket he wore against the morning chill bore the ghost of a military patch, now just a sun-bleached outline where insignia once sat. He positioned himself at the back of the crowd near the exit of the massive red barn that served as the auction house. From his pocket, he withdrew a dog-eared catalog and a stubby pencil. His weathered hands, knuckles swollen with arthritis, circled 3 items: a socket wrench, set a portable generator, and a military surplus welding trailer. The auctioneer, Dale Winters, was a showman in pressed jeans and a crisp cowboy hat. His voice rattled like machine gun fire as he worked through the smaller items. "500 on this John Deere attachment. Do I hear 550? 550 from the gentleman in the plaid. 606 from the lady with the catalog. Do I hear 650? 650 anywhere." Mac raised his hand for a set of wrenches. Winter's gaze swept right past him. "Going once at 600. Mac raised his hand higher, wincing as his shoulder protested, "Going twice." A group of younger farmers stood nearby, leaning against a tractor tire. One nudged his friend. "Check out Grandpa Moses in the back," he snickered. "Don't think his overalls can afford diesel." The others chuckled, not bothering to lower their voices. Mac didn't acknowledge them. His eyes remained fixed on the auctioneer, hand still raised. "Sold for 600 to bidder 42. Mac slowly lowered his arm. The number paddle in his other hand, 117, remained unused. This pattern repeated throughout the morning. Mac would raise his paddle and Winters would somehow never see him. When the portable generator came up, Mac stepped forward slightly, determined to be noticed. "Starting bid at 1,200 for this nearly new generator, perfect for farm outages." Mac's paddle went up immediately. Winters glanced in his direction, then pointedly looked away. "I see 1,500 from bidder 29. Do I hear 17? I bid 14 per ye." Mac said, voice quiet but firm. Winters sighed dramatically into his microphone. "Folks, let's keep it moving with serious offers only. We'll skip the distractions. Next real bid." A hot flush crept up Mac's neck, but his expression remained unchanged. He'd faced worse than public humiliation. Much worse. What no one in that auction barn knew, what no one had bothered to ask, was that Earl Mac McConnell had once kept an entire armored battalion operational during the worst sandstorm of Operation Desert Storm. For 23 years, he'd been the Army's most reliable motor pool sergeant, the man commanders called when equipment failed in hostile territory. But today he was just some old farmer in the back of the barn. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned, but the serious buyers remained. The big-ticket items would close out the auction: tractors, balers, and specialty equipment. Mac's final target, lot 58, was coming up: the military surplus welding trailer. It wasn't much to look at. Olive drab paint chipped and faded tires showing wear, but Mac's eyes never left it as the auction assistants wheeled it to the center floor. This wasn't just any trailer. The small M426B stencil on its side confirmed what Mac already knew. This was his unit, the same mobile welding station he'd personally modified during his final deployment to Iraq in 2007. He recognized the reinforced rear panel where he'd patched an IED, strike the custom tool mounts he'd fabricated from scrap metal. Next up, lot 58 military welding trailer, as is condition. Winters announced his enthusiasm noticeably diminished for this underwhelming item, opening at 2,000. No paddles rose. "All right, let's make it interesting. 1,500. Mac raised his paddle number, 117, clearly visible. Winters scanned the crowd and frowned slightly. "I need a genuine opening bid, folks." Mac stepped forward, his voice stronger now. 1,500 bidder 117. The auctioneer's smile tightened. Sir, this equipment requires proper storage and maintenance. Let's start with a serious buyer at 1,500. The young farmers from earlier snickered again. One whispered loudly, probably lives in his truck. Mac didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on the auctioneer, paddle still raised. Winters shrugged. Seeing no opening bids, we'll move this to the secondary lot. The grinding of tires on gravel cut through the air. Through the open barn doors, a black government-issue SUV appeared. Dust billowing behind it, it squealed to a halt, and the driver's door flew open. Major General Marcus Clay emerged in full-service uniform, silver stars catching the afternoon sun. At 65, he stood rigid as a flagpole, his face weathered but commanding. He scanned the crowd with piercing eyes until they locked on Mac. The auction went silent. The general strode purposefully through the crowd which parted before him like water. He stopped directly in front of the auctioneer's platform, withdrew a numbered paddle from inside his jacket, and raised it high. I'm bidding on behalf of Sergeant McConnell, he announced, his voice accustomed to carrying across battlefields. Winters blinked rapidly. Sir, this unit kept my convoy alive in 2007, the general interrupted. This man, he pointed to Mac, rebuilt it by hand under enemy fire after our column hit an IED outside Baghdad. You think his money's not good enough? Then let mine speak louder, 3,000. A collective gasp rippled through the barn. The young farmer who'd been mocking Mac stepped backward, nearly tripping over a feed bucket. 3,000 for the Welding trailer. Winters repeated weakly, all theatrical bluster gone from his voice. Do I hear 3,500? No paddles rose. No one dared compete now. The general walked to Mac and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. We never leave good men behind, he said, just loud enough for nearby bidders to hear. Not on the battlefield, not at a barn auction. Mac's expression remained stoic, but those standing closest saw the slight tremor in his jaw, the glint of moisture in his eyes that never quite formed into tears. Going once at 3,000, Winters called, suddenly respectful. You didn't need to come all this way. General, Mac said quietly, 3,000 going twice. When my assistant showed me the auction listing with this unit's serial number, I knew you'd be here, the general replied. Some debts can never be repaid, Mac. Sold to bidder 88 on behalf of Mr. McConnell. The hammer fell with finality, but instead of moving to the next item, something unexpected happened. A slow, deliberate applause started from somewhere in the back. It spread across the barn until every pair of hands joined in. Not the excited clapping for a prize tractor, but the measured respect of recognition. Mac stood straight, his posture unconsciously shifting to attention as decades of military bearing resurfaced in his stance. The general leaned closer. They see you now, Sergeant. They finally see you. If you believe loyalty doesn't end with retirement, share this story with someone who still honors service. After the Welding trailer was officially marked sold, the auctioneer called for a brief intermission. The crowd didn't disperse as usual during these breaks. Instead, they gathered around the general and Mac, a respectful distance maintained. General Clay reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a folded letter bearing the Pentagon seal. I was going to mail this to you next week, but this seems like a better moment. He unfolded the document and cleared his throat. The barn fell silent. For over 23 years, he read, Master Sergeant Earl McConnell kept armored columns moving through hostile terrain across 3 combat theaters. His mechanical innovations saved countless lives and became standard modifications throughout the Army's vehicle fleet. He never asked for glory, just the right wrench. The letter continued, detailing a commendation that had somehow fallen through bureaucratic cracks for years. Recognition for Mac's service during Operation Iron Shield. In recognition of his extraordinary service, the United States Army retroactively awards Master Sergeant McConnell the Legion of Merit. A small blue box appeared from the general's pocket. The metal gleamed inside. The auctioneer, Dale Winters, had removed his hat, holding it against his chest. His face had drained of its earlier confidence. I didn't know. You didn't ask, the general replied evenly. And you didn't look. Winters stepped down from his platform and approached Mac. Hand extended. Sir, I owe you an apology. That was unacceptable behavior on my part. Mac studied the man's hand for a moment before accepting it with a firm shake. We all make judgments. Some just cost more than others. The young farmers who had mocked Mac earlier pushed forward through the crowd. The leader, a tall man in his 20s with a John Deere cap, stepped forward. "Sir," he began, voice unsteady. "My grandfather served in Desert Storm. He always told me to respect the men who kept the tanks rolling. I didn't. I should have known better." Mac's weathered face softened slightly. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler Jenkins. I'm trying to take over my family's farm, but—" He gestured vaguely around the auction. "Equipment costs are killing us small operations." Mac nodded thoughtfully, then turned to the general. "The trailer it's paid for, in full," Clay confirmed. "The Veterans Mechanical Foundation covered it. It's yours to do with as you please." Mac's gaze returned to young Jenkins. "You've got training as a welder." "Yes, sir. Did 2 years at technical college before coming back to the farm." "Then I've got a proposition for you," Mac said. "You've got the hands, I've got the tools. Use them better than I ever did." Tyler's eyes widened. "Sir, this trailer," Mac continued, "needs someone who'll put it to good use. I'm thinking we set up a partnership. You provide the labor. I'll provide the equipment and know-how. We service farm machinery for folks who can't afford dealer prices." The barn erupted in applause, not the polite acknowledgement from before, but genuine enthusiasm. Local farmers immediately began discussing equipment they needed serviced. The auction resumed eventually, but something had fundamentally changed. When Mac occasionally raised his paddle for smaller tool lots, Winters acknowledged him immediately with a respectful, "Master Sergeant McConnell," bids before accepting other offers. By day's end, Mac had acquired his socket, set the generator, and several other small lots, all at fair prices, with no one trying to outbid the old soldier out of newfound respect. As the crowd began dispersing, the young men who had mocked Mac earlier approached him again. "We'd like to help load your equipment, sir," Tyler offered. "And maybe if you have time, you could show us how to properly service a combine engine. Dealer wants 500 just to diagnose our problem." Mac studied their faces, finding genuine remorse and interest. "Be at my place tomorrow morning, 7 sharp. We'll start with the basics." As Mac and the general walked toward the welding trailer, Mac paused to run his hand over the patched side panel. "Didn't think I'd see this old girl again," he admitted. "Some reunions are worth waiting for," the general replied. "Just like some men are worth fighting for." 6 months passed. Autumn painted the Kansas landscape in golds and browns. As harvest season approached, the Limestone County auction barn looked different now. A bronze plaque gleamed beside the entrance. "To the men who build machines and the nations that ride them." Inside a small display case held photographs of local veterans who had served in mechanical roles, prominently featuring a younger Mac in desert fatigues kneeling beside the same welding trailer that now traveled county backroads regularly. Mac rarely spoke about the changes in how the community treated him. He simply went about his work with the same quiet competence he always had. The mobile repair service he'd started with Tyler Jenkins had expanded to include 3 apprentices, all young farmers learning trades to supplement their agricultural income. They operated from Mac's modest workshop, a converted barn where tools hung in perfect order and service manuals were treated with the reverence of sacred texts. Every Wednesday, Mac taught classes on equipment maintenance. Every Saturday, they offered free diagnostics for struggling farmers. A reporter from the Limestone County Gazette tried to interview Mac about his impact on the local farming community. He just smiled and said, "I was never the story. The wrench was," the headline ran anyway. "Local hero rebuilds more than machines." General Clay visited every few months, usually on the anniversary of their Baghdad convoy incident. They'd sit on Mac's porch with a bottle of bourbon between them, watching tractors roll across distant fields as twilight settled. "You know," the general said during one such visit, "the Army has tried to replicate your welding trailer modifications. Engineers with degrees can't figure out how you made it work with such limited resources." Mac smiled faintly. "Necessity makes better inventors than any college." The welding trailer itself had become something of a local landmark, recognizable by its fresh coat of navy blue paint, Tyler's choice, and the small American flag always flying from its cab. Farmers would point it out to their children. "That's Mac's rig, man, can fix anything with moving parts." The socket wrench set Mac had purchased at the auction became a particular object of pride for his apprentices. Being entrusted to use Mac's wrenches meant you'd graduated to serious responsibility. Tyler, now a confident young mechanic, kept a photograph taped inside his toolbox, Mac showing him how to properly gap a spark plug, Both men focused intently on the tiny piece of metal that could make or break an engine's performance. When asked why he'd given a young stranger who had mocked him such an opportunity, Max simply shrugged. Some men don't leave behind trophies, he'd say, turning back to whatever engine currently occupied his workbench. They leave behind tools and stories too heavy for words. The clinic he'd built, the knowledge he shared, the hands he'd trained, these were Mac's real legacy, forged in steel and silence. Subscribe to Steel Heart Stories if you believe true value isn't worn, it's earned bolt by bolt.